Hey everyone, welcome to Unfiltered and Unapologetic, the space where we heal out loud, without shame, and bring our culture into the conversation. I'm your host, Caitlin Gil-Soto, born and raised in Lawrence, Massachusetts, and always traveling between Bani and El Cibao in the Dominican Republic, and obviously proudly Dominican. This episode is called Breaking Free from Shame, Fear, and Disconnection. Shame is quiet, but its impact is loud. It isn't just the thought that I messed up. Shame goes deeper. It tells us I am not enough. I am unworthy of love, belonging, of being seen. And once that voice takes root, it changes everything. How we love, how we show up, how much of ourselves we feel safe to share. In Dominican culture, shame doesn't always arrive in obvious ways. Sometimes it's the weight of the comment at the family gathering. You look a little chubbier. Sometimes it's the silence when no one talks about the hardship everyone knows is happening. Sometimes it's the pressure to be the pride of the family, to carry their dreams, or to never let a neighbor say anything bad about you. Little by little, we learn to shrink so no one has a reason to point, criticize, or gossip. But shrinking comes with a cost. It disconnects us, not just from others, but from ourselves. We laugh when we're hurting. We agree when we mean no. We silence our truth to keep the peace. And in doing so, we abandon the very self we were meant to live in fully. This episode is about recognizing those patterns and breaking free. It's about choosing truth over silence, connection over fear, and self-acceptance over shame. Not because it's easy, but because you deserve to live whole. And I have a journal prompt here for you guys. What's the first memory I have of being ashamed of who I am? And how has that shaped the way I show up in relationships today? And the affirmation for this question is, I release shame and walk in truth. I am worthy of love, connection, and freedom as I am. Shame is not just an emotion. It's a wound that divides us. It doesn't stay quietly in the mind. It builds walls that separate us from others and, even more painfully, from ourselves. When shame takes hold, it changes how we live. We stop trusting our voice. We doubt our instincts. We shrink, believing that showing our true selves will cost us love. And here's the truth. This connection rarely starts outside. It begins at home. Many of us grew up in families where silence was survival. In Dominican culture, this runs deep. The phrase, ¿Qué dirán la gente? Or what will people say? Has shaped generations. We were taught that the family's reputation mattered more than our personal pain. We heard, don't let anyone find out. Keep that in the family. Make sure the neighbors don't talk. So we swallowed our words, buried our hurt, and carried secrets that never belonged to us. And little by little, we drifted away from our own truth. Think about it. How many times have you laughed while you were hurting inside? How many times have you bitten your tongue even though your heart was screaming to speak? That silence doesn't disappear. It builds up. It becomes a wall between what you feel and what you show. On the outside, you may look like the responsible daughter, the hardworking son, the friend who always has it together. But inside, you're split. You're loved, but not really known. That's the tragedy of shame. It makes intimacy impossible. We long for closeness, love, belonging, yet shame keeps repeating, what if people saw who we really were? They'd leave. So we hide, we edit, we disconnect. But here's the real truth. Connection without authenticity is not connection. It's performance. It's survival. And the price is always you. Breaking free begins with naming the disconnection. Asking yourself, when was the first time I silenced my truth to protect an image? When did I start believing that my story was too heavy, too shameful, too messy to be shared? Because the moment you recognize the wall, you've already started tearing it down. I have a journal prompt here for you guys. Where in my life have I stayed silent to protect someone else's image? And how has that silence disconnected me from myself? And the affirmation for this question is, I honor my truth. I choose connection that does not require me to disappear. Shame doesn't stay contained in our private thoughts. It leaks into the way we relate to others. The relationships we build, both romantic and platonic, are shaped by what we believe about ourselves. And if shame has convinced us that we're not enough, it shows up in how we love, how we let others love us, and how we allow ourselves to be treated. In Dominican culture, this plays out in very specific ways. Many of us grew up hearing that love requires sacrifice at any cost. Women were taught to endure in silence, to aguantar, for the sake of keeping a relationship together. Men were taught that strength meant emotional distance, that showing tenderness or vulnerability was weakness. But there are other layers of shame that affect our bonds too. Take your body and appearance, for example. How many of us learned too early that our value was tied to how we looked? A comment about being too gordita or too flaca, or too fat or too skinny, or not presentable enough didn't just hurt in the moment. It planted a seed of shame that followed. And it followed us into adulthood. So maybe in our friendships, we overgive to earn acceptance. Maybe in our romantic lives, we settle for people who affirm the same lie we were told as kids, that we should be grateful for whatever love we get, even if it hurts us. Shame also teaches us to perform instead of connect. You may become the friend who never says no because you fear rejection, or the partner who stays quiet to avoid conflict, even when your needs go unmet. You might believe you have to earn every ounce of love through self-abandonment. And little by little, you realize you're present in relationships, but not whole. You're known, but only for the version of you that plays small. This is why shame and intimacy can't coexist. True connection requires honesty, vulnerability, and presence. But shame convinces us that if people saw our insecurities, our imperfections, or our truth, they'd run. So we keep hiding. But here's the breakthrough. Love that requires you to shrink is not love. Friendship that depends on your silence is not friendship. Real intimacy cannot grow in the soil of shame. If you've been living this way, you're not broken. You're conditioned. The beauty of conditioning is that it can be unlearned. Healing begins when you notice the places where shame has been the quiet third person in your relationships. The moments where you abandon yourself just to hold on to someone else. And with awareness comes choice. The choice to stop performing and to start showing up fully. I have another journal prompt here for you guys. How has shame about my body, appearance, or worth influenced the way I show up in love and friendship? The affirmation for this question is, I deserve relationships where I am seen, loved, and valued exactly as I am. Shame doesn't only live in our relationships. It lives in our potential. It doesn't just steal intimacy, it robs us of growth. Every time we let shame have the final word, we cut ourselves off from the opportunities that were meant for us. Think about how many times you wanted to try something new, speak up at work, set a boundary, or step into a space where you knew you belonged, but shame stopped you. That inner voice said, "Who do you think you are?" Or, "People like you don't do that." And instead of moving forward, you froze. You stayed small. You let possibility pass you by. In Dominican culture, this often shows up in the way success and failure are tied to family pride. Many of us grew up with the pressure to be el orgullo de la familia. On the surface, that sounds good, but underneath, it creates a weight of shame. If you succeed, you carry everyone's expectations. If you stumble, you carry everyone's disappointment. That kind of pressure doesn't leave room for mistakes, for exploration, or the natural stumbles that come with growth. So instead of trying, we play it safe. We stay in the box others created for us, afraid that stepping out will bring shame not only on us, but on our whole family. Shame also blocks abundance. If you've been told your whole life, be grateful for what you have in a way that silences your dreams, you might feel guilty for wanting more. You might believe that reaching for more love, more peace, more financial freedom is selfish or impossible. And that belief keeps you stuck in cycles of lack, repeating the same patterns generation after generation. But here's the truth. Shame keeps you in survival mode. It makes you believe that your worth is conditional, that you have to prove you deserve love, success, or even rest. But survival mode is not the same as living. Growth requires risk. It requires vulnerability. It requires giving yourself permission to step into spaces where you don't have all the answers yet. And you can't do that if shame is still the one driving your decisions. Healing this means learning to notice when shame is speaking and choosing differently. Choosing to send the email, to apply for the opportunity, to say no when you need to set the boundary that protects your peace. Each small act of courage chips away at shame's grip. And little by little, growth becomes possible again. I have a journal prompt here for you guys. Where has shame stopped me from pursuing opportunities, relationships, or dreams that I wanted? And the affirmation for this question is, I am not defined by shame. I give myself permission to grow, expand, and receive more. Shame is not only psychological weight, it's also a spiritual one. At its core, shame convinces us that we are unworthy of love, belonging, and grace. But when you really think about it, that's the exact opposite of how God designed us. We were never meant to carry the burden of shame as our identity. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame says, I am something wrong. And that lie takes root in the soul, cutting us off from the very source of peace and connection, God, ourselves, and each other. In Dominican culture, spirituality is central. Whether it's through prayer, church, or simply saying gracias a Dios or thank God in everyday life. Faith runs deep in our people. But shame twists even this. Shame makes us think that we need to prove ourselves to God, that we have to earn love, blessings, or forgiveness by suffering, sacrificing, or hiding parts of ourselves. And when we fail, shame whispers, see, you'll never be enough for him either. But that's not God's voice. God does not shame. God invites. God restores. God reminds us that worthiness is not something you earn. It's something you were created with. Every time you choose honesty over silence, every time you allow yourself to be seen as you are honoring the divine design placed in you. Spiritually, shame is a thief. It steals the intimacy of prayer because we feel too dirty to approach God. It steals the joy of community because we hide instead of being vulnerable. It even steals our ability to rest because we feel we have to constantly prove ourselves. But healing begins when we replace shame's lies with truth that we are already loved, already worthy, already seen. When you step into this truth, relationships shift too. You begin to demand the kind of love that reflects God's love: unconditional, abundant, restoring. You begin to see friendships not as places to perform, but as sacred spaces where honesty is holy. And you begin to see yourself as God sees you. Not broken, not too much, not a mistake, but a reflection of divine wholeness. I have a journal prompt here for you guys. Where has shame made me feel unworthy of God's love? And how can I begin to replace that lie with truth? And the affirmation for this question is, I am already loved, already worthy, and already enough in the eyes of God. Shame might have shaped us, but it does not have to define us. Up until now, we've explored how shame disconnects us, distorts love, and blocks growth. But healing begins when we make a different choice, when we reclaim what shame tried to take: our voice, our strength, and our wholeness. For so many of us, silence became survival. In Dominican households, we learn the rules quickly. Eso no se dice, or don't say that, or don't let anyone find out, or keep that in the family. And maybe that silence protected us then, but now it's the very thing holding us back. Reclaiming your voice doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it's saying no and meaning it. Sometimes it's telling someone how their words wounded you. Sometimes it's daring to name your dreams out loud, even if no one claps. Every time you speak truth, even in small ways, shame loses power. And part of finding your voice is redefining what strength really means. We were taught strength was keeping it all together. Women were praised to endure, for carrying weight in silence. Men were applauded for never crying, for acting like nothing ever touched them. But that kind of strength comes at a cost. Silent marriages, absent fathers, exhausted mothers, friendships built on half-truths. Real strength is not silence. Real strength is honesty. It's saying, this hurt me. It's letting yourself cry when you need to. It's allowing yourself to rest when you're tired. Vulnerability is not weakness. Vulnerability is courage in its purest form. And this is where we begin to come back to ourselves. Shame's greatest trick is teaching us to abandon who we are. We disappear piece by piece, molding ourselves to fit what others want, until one day we don't even recognize the person in the mirror. But healing is a return, a coming home to the self we left behind. The child who laughed loudly, the teen who dreamed without limits, the version of you that believed in joy before someone told you it was too much. Coming back to yourself is giving yourself permission to be that whole again, to be soft and powerful, tender and strong, messy and divine all at once. Because shame doesn't get the final say. You do. And when you reclaim your voice, redefine strength, and return to yourself, you break the cycle for everyone who comes after you. I have a journal prompt here for you guys. Where in my life do I need to reclaim my voice, redefine strength, or come back to myself? And the affirmation for this question is, my voice matters. My softness is strength. I am whole and I am coming back to myself. We've named the ways shame shows up, how it disconnects us, how it distorts love and friendship, how it blocks growth, and how it even twists our connection to God. We've also begun to see the way out, reclaiming our voice, redefining strength, and coming back to ourselves. This isn't easy work. This is generational work. Many of us were raised in silence, told to put family reputation first, to endure, to keep it moving. But here's the truth. You don't break free just for you. You break free for everyone who comes after you. Every time you speak instead of staying quiet, you're planting a different seed. Every time you show tenderness instead of hiding, you're teaching the next generation a new definition of strength. Every time you come back to yourself, you're making it possible for someone else to do the same. So here's my invitation. Choose truth over silence this week. Pay attention to one area where shame has been running the show and do one small thing differently. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It just has to be honest, because every small act of truth adds up. And before we close, let's pray together. Put your hand on your chest and let's take a deep breath. And exhale. Dear God, today I release the shame that was never mine to carry. I release the fear that kept me silent and the disconnection that made me forget who I am. Remind me daily that I was created worthy and that my voice matters and that my softness is strength. Teach me to walk in truth, to build connections rooted in honesty, and to love myself as you already love me. Let this healing ripple out to my family, to my community, and to the generations that will follow. Amen. Thank you for joining me today on Unfiltered and Unapologetic, everyone. If this episode spoke to you, take a moment to leave a review. It helps this community grow. And feel free to share with a prima, a primo, your mom, your dad, or anyone who you think needs to listen to this episode. And don't forget, you can also support the show by checking out my blank journals on Amazon, created to give you space for the reflection and healing that you're doing now. You can listen to this podcast on all platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and more. And if you'd like to support directly, you can contribute through Buzzsprout with a monthly contribution. Until next time, remember, shame doesn't get the final word. You do. I'll see you guys next time.